Big 12 Power Rankings 2024 right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. Please like the video and subscribe. How fun was the Big 12 in 2024? Well, a four-way tie for the conference championship in a myriad of scenarios leading into the final weekend. And the Big 12, as expected, very balanced, very competitive. How good was the Big 12? We will officially answer that question when we present our conference rankings, which we will do after the national championship game. Let's get to the worst of the Big 12 all the way to the top. The Big 12 Power Rankings start with, unexpectedly, Oklahoma State. They brought back 21 starters from a team that went to the Big 12 championship game, brought back a seventh-year starting quarterback. They brought back the national rushing champion. They also brought back maybe the best wide receiver core, at least as rated in 2023, and they completely crashed and burned with 9 consecutive losses in the conference. Wow, it was bad, and it finished off in disaster. Last game for Oklahoma State, a 52-0 loss to Colorado. The Cowboys lost 4 games by at least 3 touchdowns. Their best win of the season had to be the Arkansas game. They were down 17 and beat what turned out to be a pretty decent Arkansas team. Their worst loss? 0-9. Their worst loss, all of them. Okay, looking ahead to 2025, a date against UT Martin to start the season, and then Oklahoma State could be facing embarrassment yet again very early in 2025 with a trip to Oregon at number 16 in the Big 12. An easy selection, the Pokes. It was interesting to observe the 4 transitional teams from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 in 2024. 2 ascended and contended, 2 faltered badly. Of course, Arizona in the latter group. Rough transition in head coaches from Jed Fish, 10-3 in his final season in Tucson, to Brent Brennan, 4-8, 2-7 in the Big 12. Datora McMillan, still one of the best wide receivers in college football, though, despite the struggles on offense. 84 catches, over 1,300 yards. Noah Fafita at quarterback definitely regressed in his second full season. You see the numbers below. The Arizona defense was awful. Gave up 56, 49, and 49 points in his final 3 losses. Arizona's best win was a surprising at the time win over 4-0 Utah, who then, of course, crashed. The worst loss of the season? There are many to choose from. How about the UCF game, losing 56-12? Game number 1 starts with Brent Brennan trying to atone for his debut season against Hawaii in 2025. At number 15, bear down. UCF football is going to look a whole lot different in 2025 with old-time coach Scott Frost. Of course, a failure at Nebraska, but of course, remember what he did in Central Florida. From 0-12 to 12-0. He's the new head coach. Of course, Gus Malzahn initially did a decent job with the Knights, but the program was definitely stagnant, finishing at 4-8 in 2024. It looked hopeful at the beginning, led by KJ Jefferson at quarterback. RJ Harvey, one of the best running backs in college football, 1,500 yards and 22 touchdowns. UCF started at 3-0. Their best win of the season, TCU. Their worst loss, I don't know. They played most of the good teams competitively, but they lost to Colorado by 27. Jacksonville State is the opener this fall. North Carolina is a Week 3 date for UCF at number 14 in the Big 12. UCF. What happened to the Utes? Incoming from the Pac-12, they were the odds-on favorite to win the Big 12. Got off to a 4-0 start. Win against Baylor. Also a victory against Oklahoma State, which was supposed to be something valuable at the time because, of course, the Cowboys were one of the favorites entering the season as well. But they crashed and burned with 8 consecutive losses before they won the finale against UCF. Cam Rising, of course, the longtime starting quarterback, only threw the ball 66 times. Due to injury, Utah quarterbacks threw it up to the opposition 17 times. Best win of the season was against a Baylor team that won 8. 5 brutal one-score losses, including what had to be the worst loss of the season, not in regards to Utah not being competitive, because they were competitive in every outing, but it was that treacherous loss against BYU in which they had it wrapped up, and then the pass interference doomed them to a just gut-wrenching defeat. 2025 begins with a date at UCLA, At number 13 in our Voice of College Football Power Rankings in the Big 12, the Utes. Willie Fritz did it at Tulane. Can he do it at Houston? Well, the early returns on the surface not good at 4-8, 2-7 in the conference, but the Cougs were competitive, definitely. They won games against Utah, Kansas State, and also against TCU. They only lost to Oklahoma by 4 points. The quarterback play was awful. Donovan Smith was injured, and while he was on the field, 4 touchdowns and 8 picks. Houston quarterbacks threw 17 interceptions against just 9 touchdowns. The offense failed to score 20 points in 7 of the final 8 games. For Houston in 2025, it all starts with a date against Stephen F. Austin, and then Oregon State is the quote-unquote big non-conference foe. At number 12 in the Big 12, Houston. Bearcat fans were certainly not too glad to trade in Luke Fickell for Scott Satterfield, but still got off to a 5-2 start, surprisingly with a win against Arizona State, which at the time didn't seem to be too impressive, but of course we know how that turned out. No really bad losses for Cincinnati. On the scoreboard, yes, against Kansas State, 41-15, but generally competitive against the better teams in the Big 12 en route to just that 5-7 finish. It starts with an interesting date in 2025, Cincinnati taking on Nebraska at Arrowhead Stadium at number 11 in the Big 12, the Bearcats. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for our Big 12 Power Rankings. Of course, we're going to run through the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 10. Our mystery team in the Big 12 for 2024, definitely Kansas. They only won 5 games, missed postseason play after 9-4 in 2023. But look at their November run. Consecutive wins against Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado. Their worst loss was the final game of the season against Baylor, 45-17. Early, it was 2 respectable losses. We didn't know it at the time, though, against Illinois and UNLV by just 9 points. Jalen Daniels, that was the problem, among other things. He really regressed this season with just 14 touchdowns and 12 picks. The big dates for Kansas football in 2025, a date against Fresno State to start the season, and then week 3 at Mizzou at number 10 in the Big 12. Rock chalk. The coach got fired. That tells you how 2024 went for West Virginia. After making it through the previous season at 9-4, smoke and mirrors against a weak schedule, Neil Brown, yes, shown the exit in favor of favorite son Rich Rodriguez. This team's best win was against Kansas. The other 4 wins in the Big 12 for a team that went 5-4 in the conference were against teams that went 7-29. Garrett Green did not turn into a superstar in college football. 15 touchdowns and 12 picks, just a 60% completion percentage for Garrett Green. Yes, West Virginia starts the season next year against Robert Morris. And week 3, they face rival Pitt at number 9 in the Big 12. WVU. From number 9 to number 8 in the Big 12, that's the gap. That's the big jump. And pretty much from number 8 to number 1, the teams are fairly close, believe it or not. Things did not break well for Kansas State late in the season after a 7-1 start. They lost to Iowa State on the final weekend by just 1 score. And yes, but it turned out to be a typical Kansas State season at 9-4 overall after a bowl win against Rutgers. Worst loss of the season was to Houston. Kansas State also displayed 2 of the finest offensive players in the league in Avery Johnson at quarterback, 25 touchdowns, 7 rushing TDs against 10 picks, and DJ Giddens, 1,300 yards on the ground. In 2025, it all begins with a date against Iowa State. Yes, their rival, Iowa State, after playing them the final regular season game. They're playing them the first game of the season on August 23rd in Dublin, Ireland. What a spectacle for college football to start with an important game overseas. At number 8 in the Big 12 for 2023, K-State. At 6-3 in the Big 12, Texas Tech was just a 1-point loss to TCU away from joining that jam-packed 4-way tie for the first place standing in the regular season. 6-3, nice for Joey McGuire in his 3rd season. Texas Tech's worst loss was probably against Washington State. The best win, certainly Arizona State, 30-22 with that one. Quarterback Baron Morton turned in a fine season, 27 touchdowns and 8 picks. It all starts in 2025 for Texas Tech against Arkansas Pine Bluff. They've got a date in week 3 against Oregon State. At number 7 in the Big 12, Red Raiders. After a trip to the national championship game in 2022 and a fall to a lowly 5-7, all eyes were on TCU. And what was Sonny Dykes' program really all about? Well, they finished 9-4. They had a bit of a layup in the bowl game against Louisiana. They had pretty decent wins against Kansas and Texas Tech. Their worst losses, Houston, also SMU. Good football team, but 66-42 in that one. Josh Hoover, nice season for TCU. 27 touchdowns and 11 picks. How about this week 1 matchup in 2025? TCU at North Carolina and Bill Belichick. And then, of course, they have their usual out-of-conference game in week 3 against SMU. At number 6 in the Big 12, TCU. After a 3-9 campaign in 2023, Dave Aranda saved his job with 6 consecutive wins to close out the regular season and finished 8-5 after a bowl loss to LSU. At number 5 in our power rankings in the Big 12 would be Baylor. Good wins for the Bears against TCU, Texas Tech, and Kansas. The worst loss turned out to be, not at the time, but against Utah in September. Baylor is another Big 12 team that takes on SMU later in September, but it starts out with a date against Auburn. SEC and the Big 12 getting together in week 1. At number 5 in the Big 12, Baylor. From 1-11 pre-prime time to then 4-8 and 9-4 in 2024. You got to give it up for Deion Sanders. You may not like his ways, but he is producing results in Boulder. Of course, with his star quarterback and son, delivering 37 touchdowns against 10 picks. Best wins for Colorado against Baylor and Texas Tech. The worst loss had to be the Kansas game, second to last weekend of the season, which cost Colorado a chance to get to the Big 12 championship game. Then after that was the bowl game. Not a meaningless bowl game for Colorado. All the stars played, the 2 Sanders and also Travis Hunter. They took out the insurance policies and went for the gusto, tried to make a mark against Big 12 rival BYU, but blasted in that game 36-14. Not a good look for the Buffs to close it out, but overall a definite success as they tied for first place in the conference. Now without Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter, it all begins in 2025, a week 1 matchup against Georgia Tech at number 4 in the Big 12. The Buffs. Iowa State is looking for its first conference championship since 1912, but still it was an impressive run to the Big 12 championship game in 2024 for Matt Campbell and company. They did likewise in 2020 and, of course, lost a close one to Oklahoma this time around. Got buried in the third quarter by Arizona State en route to an 11-3 finish as they won the bowl game in dramatic fashion, 42-41 against Miami. That would be part of my list of best wins for Iowa State this season. Walk-off field goal against rival Iowa. The Kansas State win by 1 score in the snow to get to the Big 12 championship game on the final weekend. And then, yes, the Miami comeback against a marquee opponent. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel had 87 and 80 receptions as they were the best wide receiver tandem in the conference. And as we mentioned when we did the Kansas State portion of our Big 12 Power Rankings right here at the Voice of College Football, it starts in Ireland, our college football season opener in 2025. K-State and Iowa State at number 3 in the Big 12. Well, they made the championship game mark. How are they number 3? Well, it's the Cyclones. When it was all said and done, BYU had a better than we thought argument to make the 12-team college football playoff field. They finished 11-2, of course, crowned by that Alamo Bowl championship against Colorado, in which they completely annihilated a fully stocked Colorado team. Impressive comeback season for Kalani Sitake after going 5-7, 2-7 in the conference in his first go-around in the Big 12. Bad loss against Kansas, obviously hurt because they would have been in the Big 12 championship game. Nice wins against SMU, the only team to defeat the Mustangs in the regular season. Kansas State and Baylor. It all starts in 2025 for BYU against Portland State. They've got a non-conference matchup against Stanford at number 2 in the Big 12. Did not make the championship game, but look at the results. BYU. It still sometimes doesn't sink in how remarkable the run of Arizona State in 2024. Back-to-back 3-9 seasons, picked to be the worst team in the Big 12. They not only finished number one in the power rankings here at the Voice of College Football, they finished number one emphatically, not even close, not questioned. I didn't watch this team early in the season. I did see much of the Mississippi State game, but I just noted the scores and I thought, wow, Arizona State's 5-2, 6-2. But they weren't winning impressively against good teams until November against Kansas State, and that, I think, grabbed a lot of people's attention. And, of course, they won the Big 12 championship game, no problem, against Iowa State with a huge second half. Bo Scadaboo, 1,700 yards, 21 touchdowns. We could not talk about Arizona State without mentioning their star running back. And what a job by Kenny Dillingham in turning around this program. In 2025, Arizona State starts out with a game against Northern Arizona. Then it's a Week 2 matchup going on the road, the return trip to Starkville to take on Mississippi State. The number one team in the Big 12. This was not difficult. Most balanced conference in the Power 5. So to go through the other rankings was difficult. And certainly 9 through 16, you can certainly have some discrepancy there. But beyond that, it starts to separate. And certainly Arizona State with that performance against Texas in the college football playoff, where they, I believe, outplayed Texas past the first quarter. Arizona State at number one in the Big 12. How good is the Big 12? As we mentioned at the top of the video, we will break it down. Not just shooting darts at a wall. No, we will run through all the metrics, all the scores, and the results and the seedings in these conferences, how they played against each other. And we will do our conference rankings here in just a few days, right here at the Voice of College Football.